I'll just let folks trickle in.
Hello, hello. Happy Wednesday, everyone. I
Plethora of beverages preparing me for this hug. So I have some peppermint tea that is like my calming. And I have
love it.
A fun little trust me when I say coffee in a ghost mug, and then water because hydration is clearly important.
I love it. One for hydration, one for caffeine, and
one for vibes.
You're prepared. Amazing. If you guys want to put in the chat where you're joining from, I want to see where everyone's tuning in. Where we got people.
Yeah, it's always really fun to see like the scope. Daytona, that's awesome. I'm in South Carolina right now, so not close, but not the farthest. London, Nile, wow, we've got Columbia and Chicago, more Florida represent, Fort Worth.
Brazil.
Greenville, Matt. Well, we probably won't see each other because I'm traveling, but look up Mice on Main and see if you can do a fun scavenger hunt this weekend. Cape Town, South Africa. Wow, look at the span, folks. This is awesome.
That is so cool.
Global hug. Well, while we're waiting for people to trickle in, I have promised data puns, and
please,
data puns we shall have. So these are my top 3, but if we have time, I'll do more because, oh yes, I am full dad jokes this morning. So, and this is a challenge to the folks in the chat. If you know the answer to this, put it in the chat. All right, we'll start with, what's a ghost's favorite type of data? You won't even believe it when I say it.
I want to see someone guess in the chat.
But don't look it up. It's cheating.
Don't look it up. All right.
Yes, Nathan.
Someone said it, but they said it to host and panelists.
Okay. All right. We're shaking off that like Wednesday sleepiness, that hump day energy. All right. Next one. What type of data can you store in a glacier? This one's a little harder. Not as obvious. A frostbite. I know. Okay. If you're just cringing so hard, trust me when I say there's just one more. What do where do computers store their money? This one's a little more obvious than the second one, but maybe like it's on par with the first one. In a data bank. All right. Well,
all right. That was pretty good. Amazing.
I think we should always start hugs with jokes.
I think that's got to be a new tradition for Sales Hub and CRM HUG, because that was awesome. Well, I am going to turn it over to Jorie, guys. I know you guys are super excited. She is so awesome. I'm going to let her introduce herself, but I'm super excited to have her on today and for her to get to walk you guys through this super interactive custom report building event. And I think you're going to come out of it with tangible stuff in your HubSpot, which is a really unique takeaway from a hug. And we're going to be sending you guys some awesome stuff after too. So without further ado, Jorie,
let's do it. Amazing. So at this point, you may be thinking, who is on my screen? And the lack of plaid is telling you, it's not Kyle Jepsen. So hi, everyone. Hello, my name's Jorie, and I'm a senior inbound professor with HubSpot Academy. If you've seen my face before, or you're like, hey, this person's looking a little familiar, and you've taken Academy content, you may have seen me doing some advertising content or conversion content. Most of my time I spend on the reporting tools, but I'm kind of spread all over that app. So if my voice is sounding familiar and you are a Shark Tank fan, you may have also heard me on HubSpot's official Shark Tank Rewatch podcast, which is another bite. And if you haven't checked it out and you are very curious about like the strange and weird and awesome products that come out of Shark Tank and you want some analysis, let's hang out. And then to also prove that I'm not like an AI generative person. I am actually indeed a human. I could talk forever, you know, about spooky shows and true crime podcasts and cooking shows. And if you hear like any sounds in the background, trust me, my apartment is not haunted, but it is haunted by a gremlin, otherwise known as my doodle, Bleenie. So there is a young puppy kind of running around. So apologies in advance if there's any barking. So today's agenda, pretty straightforward. We're going to do some housekeeping just to make sure that you're getting the most out of this webinar and really kind of walking away with some tangible takeaways. But then we're going to dive first into some concepts. Now, the HubSpot Custom Report Builder is one of the features in HubSpot that I would argue you need to have some core foundational knowledge of first. And those concepts are reporting statements, data sources, measures and dimensions, and joins. And that's because without really fundamentally understanding what these pieces of data are and like how they impact your reporting, it can be really difficult to maximize your time in the report builder. And it can make some of those decisions that you need to make in order to build reports a little bit more confusing. So we're going to spend just the first bit of this hug really unpacking what each of those pieces of information are. And then like why they're important that you understand in order to build whatever custom reports you're setting out to build. Then we're actually going to spend the majority of the hug actually in the builder. I'm working in a demo portal, so small caveat, we might see some strange data. It's going to be okay. But really, I think it's really important to see how these levers and these decisions play out. So we're going to build some reports together. We're going to see how that translates into dashboards because, you know, removing reports and custom reports from their context can get a little confusing sometimes. So we're going to build that together. Then we're going to spend some time on questions and answers. So throughout the presentation, in each of these sections, I'll do a small stop just to make sure that we're covering any questions that are topic specific to the section. I do ask that we hold questions that might be a little unrelated to the specific sections that we're going through until the end, because we have time. And then don't worry, if we go a little bit over, I'm here for however long you need me. So we will have plenty of time for any of those questions. As always, you're going to see some specific options in the Zoom webinar. I highly encourage you to use the chat to really network with each other, connect with each other, share your impressions, share your favorite data pun, and like let me know. And just kind of overall, just like express yourself in this webinar. The Q&A tab, again, is where you're going to ask those questions about any of the features or topics that we're covering. So two slightly different sections with two slightly different roles, but we are well into the Zoom era. So I have full confidence that we have this down. Now, before we proceed any further, I will stop on my first checklist item. Do we have any questions before proceeding? I feel like a flight attendant. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions. Ready to go. All right, let's kick it. So I like to think about the custom report builder as the nucleus of data, the center of data in HubSpot. Now, as a HubSpot user, you have access to a bunch of different reporting tools. You have analytics, you have performance pages, you have analyze tabs, but I would argue that actually the custom report builder is where you're going to find the most flexibility in terms of joining your data together, configuring your data, filtering your data, and then visualizing your data. But like all good things, it comes with a bit of a but statement, because the flexibility of the HubSpot Custom Report Builder is actually what makes it so difficult to master. And there's a couple reasons for this, right? Like you open up the Custom Report Builder and suddenly you have access to all of your object data, all of your event data, even data and metadata about your assets. Okay, so that's one thing. And then you need to start thinking about your questions in terms of axes, right? And like as sales folks, as marketers, as admins, that might not be something that we do in our day-to-day. So it's definitely a bit of like a code switch. Then on top of all of that, you have all of these features available to you that allow you to configure and customize your report down to specific filters on your axes. And you have to make all of those choices and you add that all together. And it does create a bit of analysis paralysis, and it can be pretty overwhelming. The good news is when you're building reports, technically, no matter the exact type of report you're building, it's always going to follow a replicable set of steps. So let's cover those real quick. So first, always you're going to start with your data. Now you can think about your data in terms of the unsummarized facts that you have about your business and about your customers and that you're storing in your CRM. In order to actually do anything with your data, the first step that you need to do is join it together. Now, we're going to get into what joining means more specifically in just a second, but for right now, you can think about joining as creating splices of data, pieces of data, lenses of data, because it's very rare when you're building custom reports or just reports in general that you're going to be wanting to report on all of your data for all time about everything, right? You're going to want to actually sort of, if you think about it in terms of a spreadsheet, highlight a specific section of data that directly relates to a business initiative or a business question. So that first step is joining. From there, you enter into that bulk of the reporting process, which is really just summarizing or visualizing your data within the context of your business question or business goal. And this is really where you start to see that raw data turn into information, which again is just summarized data with a new context. And these are actually the two steps that are going to like physically happen within HubSpot, is this joining and reporting section. But we all know as good reporters that technically it doesn't stop there, although it would be really nice if it did. Otherwise, we just have like pretty charts. So the next step is actually like the analyze phase, which is really where you're starting to identify, okay, so you have your visualization. What are the trends? What are the patterns? What are the outliers? What are things like seasonality telling us, right? And from that, ideally, by asking your data a bunch of questions, you're able to garner a new insight from your data. And we all know that insight for the sake of insight is not actually very valuable. So ideally, you're taking that insight and you're making a decision with it. Now, at this stage, this is what people are often referring to in terms of data-driven decision-making. And it is the idea that you're taking the analysis that you've just performed on your visualization or report and really making the connection about what your data is telling you about your strategy. What should you be stopping? What should you be starting? What should you be continuing to do when it comes to your business or your process or how you're interacting with customers? And oftentimes, we often think about the reporting cycles like really stopping there. But I would argue that there's actually the fifth and most valuable step to all of that, which is to actually use your data to take an action. Now, granted, the data might be telling you you're doing a great job. You should just keep doing what you're doing. And that is still taking action. But ideally, in order to actually get true business value out of your data, you're actually always going to be wanting to think about how is this report going to directly impact or cause us to take action on something regarding our business. And in order to ensure that this is like a true cycle of reporting that is actually driving business value, you need to always be thinking about how your reports are going to drive action. And then, of course, reporting is iterative. So as much as we'd like to say that it just stops at one report, of course, this cycle will always continue. Trust me, you'll build a report and then have additional questions and the cycle begins again. Now, how do you ensure that your reports are always connecting back to finding business value, right? We don't ever want to get into a situation where we're building reports for the sake of reports. Well, folks, here is Jorie's unofficial guide to totally rocking the custom report builder, which doesn't have a fun acronym, but maybe we can workshop it in the chat. So to ensure that you're always connecting your report building back to driving business value, you need to think about reporting statements. Now, oftentimes we think about entering into the HubSpot custom report builder with a business question, right? And I think actually we need to take it a step further, because ultimately you should be able, before you even dive into the custom report builder, you should always be able to connect the report you're building to a specific business purpose. So that is to say, you need to be able to one-to-one explain in one succinct sentence why you're building a report and why it matters to your business. And it will almost always take the structure of, I want to do X, or I want to build X report so that I can Y. Again, business goal, business initiative, future state of your business you're aiming to achieve with the new data that you've summarized. Doing so, and even just getting into the habit of thinking about your reports this way, can save you so much time trying to sift through ways to build reports that don't actually help you do much. And it's going to make sure that when you're building reports in HubSpot, you're building with intention, which is just ultimately going to save you a lot of time and help make your reporting process a lot more efficient. So let's see this play out as an example, right? This is the sales and CRM HUG. So I was like, yes, let's talk about sales data. So say you're a sales manager, for example, and you're trying to replicate and scale the success of your top reps with reports so that you can achieve this at scale across your team. It's a great goal. I love that for you. An example of a reporting statement that you might build in that case then is, I want to know how often my top reps are engaging with contacts so that I can establish appropriate activity goals for my entire sales team. So again, you have that initial statement. The report that you want to build is some kind of activity report filtered by your top reps. And then you have the business value that this report is going to drive to establish appropriate activity goals so you can scale that across your entire sales team. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, Jorie, this is abstract. I don't need another framework to think about reporting. And besides, this is going to slow me down, right? Wrong. Actually, another tactical benefit of laying out how you're visualizing your report and really putting into words what you're trying to accomplish in the HubSpot custom report builder is actually going to help you gather the ingredients a lot quicker than if you just sort of like dive into the builder and sort of like think that we're just going to figure it out from there. So looking at your reporting statement will almost always give you some hints in terms of the three primary components of your HubSpot custom report, and that is your data sources, your data measures, and your data dimensions. Now let's dive into what each of those means in a little more detail. The first is your data sources. Now, if you've been in the HubSpot custom report builder before, these are the pieces of information that you're selecting on the joining tab. If you haven't been, that's totally fine. That's why we're here today. But you can think of data sources as the objects, assets, and events that are storing your data in HubSpot. This is where your data is living across the landscape that is HubSpot. And as you think about your reporting statements, you need to be on the lookout for words that are going to sort of hint on where this data lives. So in the case of our reporting statement, and this is always going to be the first step, right? Finding out where your data lives so that you can bring it together and consolidate it in the HubSpot custom report builder. So in terms of our reporting statement, we have two words that sort of hint at where this data might be living so we can bring it into a report. And that is the words engaging and contacts. Now, at this point, custom report building is a lot more easy if you understand which objects are currently tracking data in your account. In the case of these two, I'll give you the answer. When you're thinking about sales reps engagement activities, that is almost always stored in the activities data source. And then contacts kind of gives it away because there is a contacts object. So information about your contacts is going to be stored in the contacts data source. Okay, so we're starting to think about where our data is coming from. But then I said these two words, dimensions and measures, and more so than data sources, dimensions and measures are far more unfamiliar to us because I think data sources get mentioned, throughout HubSpot. We think about object and event data a lot. Dimensions and measures are usually found just within the context of the custom report builder. So they're going to be a little bit more unfamiliar. So first off, data dimensions, what are they? Well, a data dimension is just an attribute about your object or event data or your asset data, right? Your metadata. And I will repeat this several times throughout this hug, but dimensions are gray. They're always gray in the HubSpot Custom Report Builder. If you're ever curious about how it should function in a HubSpot Custom Report, we've color coded them. And I will just keep beating that because as much as the HubSpot Custom Report Builder becomes intuitive, sometimes it's really helpful to be like, okay, it's gray. I know the functionality it's going to play in my report. So data dimensions are gray. But, like what are data dimensions besides attributes, right? That's kind of vague, doesn't really help. Let me tell you. So data dimensions tend to be categorical information, and they tend to also store frequency values. So you can think of frequency values sort of like date properties when it comes to building your reports. And then in terms of categorical data, you can think about data dimensions as everything that's not a number property, pretty much. As I mentioned, they are listed as gray in the custom report builder. And here is the absolute pro tip. They're almost always going to be with the exception, that's the word, of horizontal bar charts. They are x-axis. They're going to be x-axis. And I guess like the exception of tables and pivot tables. When you're thinking about a graph that has two axes, dimensions, your gray properties are going to go on the x-axis. And when you're looking at data dimensions, there are some exceptions to this, but mostly in the custom report builder, if you pull up your properties in that left-hand columns, they're going to be accompanied by like a little ABC icon, or if they're a date property, a little calendar. So already you can sort of see the HubSpot Custom Report Builder trying to define where certain pieces of data should go as you're building out your custom report. So we're talking about categorical data. We're talking about time series data. Okay, there must be a complement. There is, and that's your data measures. Now, data measures, you can think about the numbers. They're the numerical attributes of your data. And just as dimensions are gray, measures will always evermore be green in the HubSpot Custom Report Builder. So just in terms, if you're a very visual person, you can just with color differentiate the two different types of data pieces in your HubSpot Custom Report Builder based on their color. And the characteristics of measures, as I mentioned, are first, they're numerical attributes. So they're going to usually deal with numbers. They are green. And HubSpot, actually, you'll see when you first log into the HubSpot Custom Report Builder, HubSpot will also automatically aggregate measures that most frequently are needed when building custom reports. So you can think about default measures like count of contacts, count of deals, count of tickets. It kind of depends on the exact data source you're using, but HubSpot will always calculate some default measures that it's predicting that you might need throughout the course of your HubSpot custom report building. And just like dimensions are x-axis items, measures are y-axis items. So again, if you're like, oh no, Jorie, like I haven't taken maths in like years and years, don't worry. Measures, y-axis, dimension, x-axis. And when you think about your HubSpot or your reporting statement, going back to how these, again, can give you some hints as to how you're going to actually build your reports, you can start to think about the details of your reporting statements and start to kind of parse out, okay, what's going to be my dimension and what's going to be my measure here. So here we have in our reporting statement, how often, right? And that is going to usually be a count of a default measure, count of activities. It's a quantity. And so that's going to give us a hint that, okay, as we're building out this report, I'm probably going to need the count of activities field. Then you have this additional detail of my top reps. So we have some kind of sense that we're going to need to bucket, again, categorical data, our report based on a property. In this case, it's activity assigned to, but we know that we're going to need to kind of create buckets based on rep. And if we didn't know sort of inherently what that property was, we could look through our default properties or just go into our properties in HubSpot settings just to kind of prepare ourselves. And then you have this sense of like activity goals. So we might need a detail in terms of like the differentiation of the different types of activities that our top sales reps might be doing frequently so that we can set those goals for the team. So again, reporting statements, they might take some fine tuning, they might take some tweaking, but I really highly encourage you to take the time, even if it's just 5 minutes before building your custom report, to really write down what you're trying to accomplish and why you're trying to accomplish, because I cannot overstate that sometimes just mapping it out will already give you the recipe to the custom report that you're trying to build before just diving in and suddenly having all of these options available to you. Now, I have a bit of a pop quiz. You didn't think it was coming? Well, pop quiz for you. So I have two reporting statements here. Don't worry, I will be giving the answers in just a minute. But I have two reporting statements here. And if you are up for it, I'd love in the chat if you could start to guess. We'll start with the first reporting statement, the data sources we might need to consider, and potentially some of the measures and dimensions that we would need. And if that's like a little uncomfortable for you still, even just the field types or the properties that we need to build these reports. Okay, so the first one is, I want to know the average deal size month over month for new business so that I can develop an appropriate discounting strategy. What do we think the dimensions for that would be, or even just the data sources? It's okay. There's no wrong answers. I will tell you the right answer. Deal type, discount. Yep. Data source. Yep. Deals. Okay. Well, I just realized that I put my answers on the right side. So we're gonna put a pin in it for just right now. We'll cover the answers in a minute, but we'll actually move on to our reporting statement number 2. Yes, I'm seeing that deals, we're definitely getting the right answers in terms of like deals being a really important data source here. This one's actually really tricky. And I had to think about it for a second, even though I wrote the reporting statement. It's fine. I want to know the email send times that generate the most clicks so that I can adjust my sending schedule to improve my click-through rate. This is more marketing oriented in nature. And it is tricky. It is tricky. What do we think this could be? Yep, email send time, click-through rate. Yep. Where does that live, Will? Where does that live? What data source? Marketing emails is a good one. Yep. Yes, Mitch. Amazing. Okay, Mitch caught the sort of the twist. The marketing email analytics data source is a public beta right now, but man, is it just so key if you're looking at your marketing event data. All right, so we've got the answer. So in order to build these reports out, for the first reporting statement, you would actually only need the deals data source. You could add contacts if you were trying to bring in associated data, but in terms of like the dimensions and measures you'll need, you could actually just build it just using a single data source. So the dimension you'll need is actually that timestamp, it's close date monthly. And then the measure, you could use amount. I always prefer when building reports, this is just a Jorie thing. It's my best practice to use amount and company currency, especially if your portal is operating in multiple currencies, just because it makes conversions really easy. And we'll see that in just a minute. And my visualization pro tip would be to make that a line chart because it's a time series report. So essentially a report that goes over time. So that would be a line chart. And then I'm so glad that someone got it. Okay, so the data source that you would need to build this type of second report would be marketing email analytics, which is a public beta that you can opt into if that's the type of report you're trying to build. And then I say that you would also potentially want to use marketing email, just because marketing email is sort of the rich metadata that you have about your marketing emails in your HubSpot account. So it's always good to just like bring it in just in case you might need to add like an additional column or filter to your report. I would recommend that if you were building this type of report, the dimension you'd need is like delivered date. We'll get into what date parts are in just a bit, but essentially it is a way to bucket out your different data based, rather than just like thinking about it in sequential steps. It's like bucketing it out as if time were categories. But we can get into that in just a minute. And then your measures, ultimately, I would think, how I would recommend building this report would be to look specifically at marketing email delivered rate and marketing email click-through rate. So you could get some really interesting columns to compare against each other in what I would recommend would be a pivot table. You could do it as a table. I think pivot tables give you a little bit more organizational oomph. So I would recommend building this as a pivot table. Okay, that was a lot to cover. First section down. Do we have any questions? No. Okay. Well, we will continue on because we've got data sources. We've got measures and counts, or measures and dimensions. Now we need to talk real quick about joins. The good thing about joins is they're pretty quick to cover. So a join. What is a join? Essentially, a join is when you take two different tables and you combine them together. So you create a new table that has a combination of the columns from the original two tables. So essentially, a join is combining two different tables. All right. Well, what does this mean for the HubSpot custom report builder? When did the marketing email analytics come into beta? That is a good question. I know that it's been around for a couple months, but I can definitely look at the exact date that it got released. So I will make a note of that. Okay, so in terms of joins, you can combine tables in a bunch of different ways. And if you work in SQL, this might be something that is a task that you do very frequently in different databases. In HubSpot specifically, joins are always going to be left joins in the builder. So essentially, if you have table 1 and table 2, what that's going to do is it's going to take all of the records from table 1 and then just the associated records in table 2. Now, you might be thinking, Jorie, that'd be better with a visual. I've got you, friend. So imagine that table A is your that first table, and table A is what we call your primary data source. It is the core table that you are reporting on. Table B and any subsequent tables that you're joining in are going to be what we call your secondary table source. Now, to visualize how this works as a left join, when you create a left join out of two tables, it's going to take all of the records that come from table A and again, just the associated records that come from table B. So when you think about what's my primary data source versus my secondary data source, you really need to think about, the records that you definitely want to have in your custom reports and the ones that you might be excluding by creating a secondary data source and adding it to your custom report. So let's actually look at a more fleshed out example. So say we create a report that is a contacts primary data source and a deals secondary data source report. How this is going to play out is like, say we have these two tables, we have 4 different customers on the left-hand side, and we might have 5 different deals on, these are celebrities on this table. So we have 5 different deals, right, on our deals object. So for our newly created report, we'll find that all of our contacts are going to be brought into our new report. And then all of our deals that are associated with our contacts are also going to be brought into our report. So we can see that, for example, because contacts and deals have a one-to-many relationship, there's actually going to be 2 deals brought in that are associated directly with Dharmesh, for example. But we also see that there is a deal record here that isn't associated with any of our contacts, right? And that's the type of thing that you need to be thinking about, because that's the exact type of information that's going to be excluded when deals are combined with contacts on the left join. So if we kind of go through the builder, we're clicking contacts, we're clicking deals. What's happening behind the scenes is you're creating this new data table. This would be what your HubSpot custom report builder is pulling from. And we'll see that the two duplicate deals, or I guess they're not duplicate, the two different deals from Dharmesh are definitely brought in because they're associated with Dharmesh. Katie is brought in, even though she's not associated with any deals, because contacts are our primary data source. Again, all of our contacts got brought in. And then this last deal, it actually isn't brought in because it's not, again, associated with any of our contacts. So it's just really important to start to think about the information that you are including and the information that you are excluding when creating and making these decisions in the HubSpot custom report builder. Because if you go into your report and you're expecting this $22 deal in your reporting and you don't find it, ultimately analyzing your results might get a little confusing. You might think there's something wrong or like need to troubleshoot some of your data, when really what it's doing is just sort of operating as expected on a left join. Do we have questions about joins and how this is working in HubSpot? Yeah, Dharmesh making it rain. Is there ability to write custom SQL for data in HubSpot? Not currently. There are some like small things that have been brought into the builder, and I think that's definitely something they're trying to think about in terms of like the long-term visions of things like Ops Hub, but not currently able to write custom SQL. Is this only used through? Yeah, so this is the concept of left joins is really something that you're only going to need to think about within the context of the HubSpot custom report builder, because this is how the HubSpot custom report builder is essentially creating new data sets that you can report on. So definitely a HubSpot custom report builder specific type of concept. Yeah. All right. Those are our two questions. Just making sure. Yep. Okay, cool. Well, we are going to dive right in to our building portion. Okay, so you're in your HubSpot account. Let's actually go back. You might be thinking, okay, how do I actually access the HubSpot custom report builder? To access the HubSpot custom report builder, you navigate to the reports drop-down menu and then select reports. If you're also operating directly from a dashboard, you can go to the top right and click add report and create from scratch. But if you're going this avenue on the following screen, it's going to bring you to the list of saved reports in your portal. And you're going to want to click create report in the top right. This is going to bring you into the report builder, which is sort of the home base, if you will, for all of the different types of report builders that are available in HubSpot. We're going to, because we're talking about custom reports, dive into the HubSpot custom report builder. And this will take you into the join tab. So when you think about left joins and data sources, this is going to be sort of that be all. Yeah, I know. 54,000 reports. This demo portal, you're going to see some numbers. We're just gonna roll with it, right? But I wanted to create reports that actually showed something. So just bear with me in terms of the quirk. Yeah, the reporting add-on is definitely not meant for 54,000 reports. However, here we are. So on the join tab, you're going to see it under data sources. This is going to be where you start to select the tables that you're creating into a single data set that you can then report on. So to choose your primary data source, you're going to actually use this drop-down menu. I think it's kind of helpful that they differentiate it. Otherwise, it's like, wait, what was my primary data source again? And then you'll choose your secondary data sources by selecting one of these tags. This is an ever-changing screen, to be fully honest. They are constantly adding, they being the reporting team, new sources of data or ways to splice your data that could create new and interesting reports. So, I would definitely recommend, as you're building reports or just as you're getting familiar with the tool, taking the time to look at like what's in beta, what's new. Look, it's out of beta, actually. Look at that. Okay, so between this week and last week, they just fully launched the marketing email analytics to public. So if you wanted to build that pivot table, the choice is yours. But I think it can be really helpful to just familiarize yourself with like what's possible to pull from while you're building your reports, and get familiar with your data and how it gets configured into the HubSpot custom report builder that way. Two major things that I want to cover here is this join info tab and this data preview tab. So when you select different data sources, what it's going to do on the right-hand side is it's going to show you the different types of data sources that you have selected on the left. But it's going to kind of start to give you a sense of the calculations, right? So it's going to give you first all the available rows of data that are available in each of the data sources. Again, I think it's really helpful to think about data sources almost like tables of data. This is going to show you how many rows of data are available on each of your data sources to then report on. And then based on the exact decisions and associations you've kind of created by selecting your different data sources, you're going to see the exact amount of rows that are brought in. So we'll see, because contacts is our primary data source, again, all of our contacts are being included. But then because we're only including the associated activities, not all of them are going to be included. In fact, that is so many. A significant portion less, which is still a lot of activities, is actually being excluded. If you're kind of more of a visual person, you're trying to really think about the types of columns and really visualize this as creating a new table out of two different data sources, two different data tables. Oftentimes, I will recommend people to look at the data preview tab now with over how many? With over 2 million activities. We'll see if that actually populates. Oh, it does. Look at that. See, HubSpot so fast. But it will give you a preview of like the types of columns that are going to be available to your reporting, as well as some initial preview of the exact type of information that's being pulled in. So if you get a little confused just like looking at the raw numbers of how your joins are working, data preview tab can just be helpful to sort of concretely see the new table that you're creating in the screen. Two other small call outs are the sample reports tab. When in doubt, if you're just getting familiar with the HubSpot custom report builder, definitely go to the sample reports tab. This will contain initially all of your contacts, by default, all of your contact sample reports. But as you scroll down, based on the decisions that you've made in the data sources tab, you'll start to see sort of sample reports available that answer specific questions. Again, it's really helpful here because the reporting team has positioned these as the types of questions that they'll answer. So what's really neat about this, I'll show it real quick, is if you choose one of these sample reports, oh my gosh, your time just got so much easier, because if you click next after clicking a sample report, it's going to auto configure your report for you. It's going to build it for you. And then based on visualization best practices, like just give you the report to save. So sample reports, when I say they save you time, like this is time and heartache that you just don't have to worry about. So sample reports are an amazing feature. Another option, if you have Ops Hub, is this option of data sets. Now, data sets, especially if you're an admin or especially if you're the operations folks and you really don't have the time to potentially explain how data works in HubSpot, that's totally fine. But you need to enable your team to effectively build reports really quickly. Well, let's see, this is a good one, sure. You can create data sets where when your team goes into the HubSpot custom report builder, they'll just select the data set, not even worry about joins or primary data sources or secondary data sources. And they're just going to be able to create reports based on a pre-configured set of fields that you have curated for them. So that can make it, especially if you know that your team is going to just need to create like a certain type of report with a certain amount of fields, it can be just like a good way to quickly empower everyone to start creating reports without worrying about unleashing them on all of the field options that are available in your HubSpot custom report builder. So data sets can also supercharge your HubSpot custom report building, if you will. But let's talk about the report that we actually have based our entire reporting statement on, and that is configuring a report to showcase how our top reps are contacting and engaging with contacts so that we can set appropriate activity goals. See the narrative continuity here. That's going to be the first report that we build. So based on our reporting statement, we know some of the dimensions and measures that we need to start considering. But before we get into that, had a couple, we're going to go feature by feature here, have a couple of things that I want to make sure that we're covering. So in terms of deciding your dimensions and measures, you have this column on the left, which is going to be your access to all of the available reporting fields when you're building your report. If you know what your properties are called, you can use the search bar at the top left. But otherwise, you can scroll based on just it's all alphabetized and kind of find the field reporting types that you're trying to report on. Let's see. Okay, fields. So this is an interesting section that I think a lot of people use to sort of gather the ingredients for your reporting recipe. And I think that's a good use case. I did want to call out in the fields option that when you go and export your report, the fields that you have in your X and Y, potentially if it's a table, your columns and rows, as well as the fields that are in this area are going to be actually the data that gets exported. So you want to make sure if you're planning to, share this report or export it to a CSV, that you're including whatever other columns that you want in that CSV in your fields option. Otherwise, they might not export and you might get a CSV that's like kind of helpful. So make sure that you're using this fields option if you're planning to export, or if you just need to kind of like organize your ducks in a row. And then the only other thing that I want to cover before we get to actually building the report is sometimes when you drag a number field over, you'll notice, hey, that's a number field. Why isn't HubSpot recognizing it as a measure? What's going on here? Well, it would if you automatically dragged it to the y-axis. It would tell HubSpot, hey, I need this to be aggregated as a measure. But sometimes certain reports can technically fall into the bucket of like, that could be a categorical bucket that you might need to report on. So it could technically operate as both a dimension and measure. If you are trying to put this in either a table and you need it to operate as a measure, or for whatever reason, you need it on your X axis and it's not working as a measure, the best thing you can do and how to sort of auto calculate this as a measure rather than a dimension would be to click the pencil icon and use this aggregation feature. This is telling HubSpot that even though there's many rows of data, we need them calculated in a certain type of way, AKA this is a measure, treat it as such, and then adding a different aggregation or adding an aggregation HubSpot didn't like that, but it will turn it into a measure automatically. So if you're noticing that you're using a number property or a number field and you need it to be a measure and it's not operating as such, it's probably because you need to aggregate it. All right, so I know we've got some time. All right, so for our first report, we're going to breeze through these. Just realizing I'm very loquacious. So first report is that activity report. Now, based on a reporting statement, we definitely know some of the initial dimensions and measures we need to build a report like that. So for example, we know that count of activities is going to be probably the best way to measure that frequency of how often certain activities are happening. We know that based on our goal to see how our top reps are performing, we need this property activity assigned to, and because it's a dimension, we know that goes on our x-axis. And then because we're probably interested in the types of activities that are happening, we probably need this activity type property. And we're going to put that into the breakdown field. Now, the breakdown field is basically when you need to create subcategories of data, usually on your x-axis. So it's going to create buckets on, in this case, the different bars. So the breakdown field is just like another way to give a specific lens to your data. But we look at our report and it's not great. right? It's not great. That could be because this demo portal is massive. And maybe we could like justify zooming in to certain areas, which is like a fun feature that you can just keep zooming into certain areas of your report. But ultimately, these zooms can be reset on the dashboard level or the report level. I know you can zoom in, right? Good stuff. It's really good if you have this on the dashboard and you're like, wait, I just need to zoom into that one specific section. It is functionality both in the builder and on the dashboard. Anywho. Okay, but you're looking at your report and you're like, this isn't great, Jorie. This tells me nothing. There's these large lines, these small lines. What's going on? Okay, you find yourself in a situation like that. First thing to do would be to start to organize your x-axis. So in order to organize either axis, you're going to hover over this pencil icon, click it, and then you're going to go to this sort option. Now, we probably want to sort based on how the amount of activities that reps are doing. So we are going to choose the count of activities as our like sorting property, and then we'll probably do descending because we're really actually interested in the ones that are the activities that, or the reps that are doing the most activities rather. So we're going to click apply, see what that does for us. Hopefully it doesn't take too long to refresh. This portal has like many reps. Okay, it's still not the greatest, right? Because again, there's just so many reps here and they're doing such great work. But we're looking at our top reps. Now we might define our top reps as the top 10 folks that are reaching out to people the most often. So actually on your x-axis, what you can do is set a limit. So you might realize that you don't need all of the data points to really make the analysis or like you hit that goal. What you can do is set a limit. So in this case, the top 10 reps based on their count of activities. So setting a limit can be another great way to organize your x-axis. And voila, we've got slightly better report. But, seems like a lot of these are tasks. And maybe actually as a sales manager, we're only really curious about how they're actively engaging with contacts. And maybe to us, that means calls made, meetings made, and emails sent. So how do we get that type of information into our report? Well, that's where filters come in. So filters are going to help you zoom in and zoom out to your report and the data that you're bringing into your report to a very fine degree. So if you go to the filters tab, we can actually filter by the type of activities we're bringing into this report. So to add a filter, you're just going to click apply filter, and then you're going to select is any of, and then click call, meeting. And then I think we said email sent to contact, right? That's how we're defining how our reps are actively engaging with contacts. Then always make sure to click apply, because if you click away, it's going to not apply to your filters. So we're going to click apply. And voila, maybe that is our best. Like that is exactly what we're looking for. We have our top 10 reps, how often they're making certain engagement activities with our different contacts. And maybe from here, we can start to look at trends and say, hey, like it seems that our top reps are calling people more, and maybe that should be what impacts our goals. So I know that we're running a little low on time, but I promise we can get through these next couple of reports pretty quickly. So the next item that we've talked about at depth is this idea of average deal size. Now, I like to show this report just because it's a slightly different report because it's a time series report. Say you're in the custom report builder and you're like, actually, this is not what I need to be reporting on. What do you do? Actually, at the top left, you can click edit data sources. And this is going to allow you to bring in additional data sources that you may not have realized that you needed, or just to completely reconfigure your report. You can change even your primary data source from this screen. So because we're going to actually shift into creating a report that's about average deal size over time, we're going to shift our primary data source to deals and then click apply. Now, when you're making a change that is just going to completely rip up the report, just like piece of paper, tear it, you will always get this pop-up that's like, are you sure that you want to do that and not save the beautiful report that we just built? But if you do want to do that, just click discard. You're starting with a clean slate. All right, so to create a average deal size over time report, this one's actually pretty straightforward. What you'll need to do is to create, to drag close date, which will automatically configure to month over month, into your Y or your X-axis. And then we said amount in company currency was the other measure that we're going after. Now, again, you could definitely do amount, just like the amount field. I just find it really helpful to use the amount in company currency field. And because maybe we want average deal size, whenever you have an aggregated measure, you can absolutely change the aggregation. So here we would choose average. Now, oftentimes I get questions like, okay, this is great and all, but maybe I actually want to see how I'm doing this year versus a previous period of time, maybe last year. This is where this compare by field comes in handy, because it's going to let you see progression against past progression. So what you can do is, especially with date properties, it's actually only going to be date properties. You're going to drag close date into the compare by field. And this is going to allow us to compare our progression of close dates from this year to last year. Yeah. Again, demo portal. And I would always recommend, just like on my best practices, this isn't, I mean, maybe you find this type of visualization really helpful to compare like the Q1s across the years. Time series reports, I'm going to highly recommend you use line or area charts, combination charts also, depending on like the exact type of report that you're building. But this, I think, is a little better to like match progress of this year versus last year against each other. Let's see, another thing, and then I promise I'll start to wrap up and then we can go into questions. Another thing to consider here is that maybe you're actually looking at just your progress this year and how you might be operating not against yourself last year, but against your current goals. So you can't currently add a goal line if your goals are dynamic. So say you have a different goal in Q1 to Q3, but you can always add static goals to time series reports. So again, reports that show progress across time. The one thing that you can't do is have a compare by field and a static goal line. So we're going to actually remove that real quick. But to add, and we definitely don't want breakdown by. But to add a static goal line to a chart like this, I highly recommend always check out what's available in your chart settings, because chart settings can make your visualization a lot more dynamic. So in the chart settings for line charts, and I believe area charts as well, you can add this monthly goal. So monthly goal and a date part. Oh, let's do that. So the custom report builder will always tell you when it's about to break. So that's always good. If you ever kind of encounter that, you can just make sure you're reconfiguring your report. But in your chart settings, you could add a static goal line. Maybe that's $20,000. I don't know what's happening in this September 2021, but our sales reps were on fire, clearly. So maybe actually our goal to just showcase it should be more like, it's even too small. Let's just say 7 million. That's fine. And it will add a goal line that you can compare it against. This is actually a good example, because if you have these wild outliers, it can be really difficult to analyze your report in context. And that's why this Y-axis scale is going to be really important. So when you have a Y-axis scale set to linear, that's going to be a true representation of your data quality or your data quantities and how they compare against each other. So this 499 is very different from this 7 million, right? And we can see that in this report. But it can also make it really difficult to analyze, which is why you may, if you have, again, these wild outliers in a time series report, change it to logarithmic. This is just essentially going to change the scale at which the y-axis is calculated, and it's going to make it a little easier to see your like peaks and valleys together in one report. So if you find that you again are dealing with these outliers, maybe there's spikes in seasonality compared to different quarters, logarithmic can change that. Now, again, before we just like quickly move on, again, the recording will be sent out. So if you have to leave, don't worry, we'll still see each other in a minute. The one last thing that I do want to say in terms of building custom reports is that KPI reports are actually super underrated. So I always recommend when you're starting to think about building custom reports to build it out in terms of KPI reports, or build a KPI report and see kind of how it plays out. So a KPI report is going to just show you a raw number of a series of records or assets that share a complete or a singular characteristic. So it's just going to show you a number, and then it's going to give you access to the list of things that make up that number. I haven't seen many people really talk about the value of KPI reports, but where I see this type of report coming in really handy is when you're thinking as an admin or as a manager in terms of data quality issues. Now, let me show you what I mean. So if you pull in, let's actually change our data source real quick to contacts for the sake of this example. If you pull in a count of contacts, it's going to show you the amount of contacts that are currently available in your CRM. And if you click that, you get a list of all your contacts. That's not particularly helpful. But if you think about it in terms of dirty data, this starts to have a little bit more fun implications, right? Because you can use your filters to define exactly the count of contacts being brought in. So potentially, maybe we're just trying to see in terms of our CRM, how many contacts are missing a first name, right? Because we know that sometimes our record keeping isn't super great, and we need to make sure that all of our contacts have a first name, because that we're using that for personalization in our emails. We can create a filter, first name is unknown, and we see that we actually have a bit of an issue here. And like, granted, this is something that you could automate with Ops Hub using like the content management or the contact management tool, but you know, we don't all have access to Ops Hub. So here's how you could access your list of contacts that might need some automation or might need some data cleanliness. So maybe you're actually interested in people that have contacts that have no known first name, or don't have an email address. You could filter in contacts that have no first name and no email address, and that could be used as a report to showcase, okay, so these 6 contacts like absolutely need our help. They can be really simple reports that help you kind of get to the core of records that might be missing information. So in terms of data quality issues, this is going to be a really good report to help save you some time. Now, at this point, you might be like, well, Jorie, all these reports just got simpler, right? Over time, like we went from these graphs to now we're just looking at numbers. How does this help me build scalable and fun reports, right? Well, let me tell you, using these 3 reports that we've just built, so a activity report on your sales reps, a average deal size for your deal records, and some data quality KPI reports, we've actually just built 2 dashboards, and you didn't even realize it. So let me actually leave this page. And I've built two lovely dashboards that we will go over super quickly together, because one of the things that I see all the time is questions about, okay, like I'm a sales manager and I need to build these dashboards for each of my sales reps so I can track how they're doing. And then so I have a sense of how well my team's performing. So it is both for the sales rep, but then also the sales manager to check on the progress of the sales rep. So with our activity report, we can actually get some really fun data and really fun dashboards going. So small caveat I will say is I highly recommend, whenever possible, that you contextualize your reports to what they mean in your business. And here's what I mean. On every part of your dashboard, you can click add images, text, or video. And that adds the opportunity to add these, I guess cards is the best way to call them, that help you contextualize whatever you're seeing in your report. So say you have this activity report that is exactly what we built. It's going to be, let's see, even simpler. It's going to be count of activities, filtered by activity assigned to, broken down by activity type, and then just filtered by a specific sales rep, right? And it's filtered by calls because maybe that's like one of the major targets we're giving our sales reps. You have this activity report, you have this weekly calls made report, but that alone might be a little difficult to read because your sales rep might look at that and be like, okay, like, well, how am I doing, right? You can create cards that are like, here is what you're trying to hit on the daily basis, and you could filter this report to daily. Here's what you're trying to hit on your weekly basis, and you could filter it to just show weekly data or even monthly, right? And suddenly this 45 number, right, this is filtered to weekly. That actually helps your rep say, oh, I'm like a little behind, right? Like I'm not at my weekly minimum yet. So maybe that's something that you as a manager could just check in on the progress of, or it can kind of help them keep track on where they are versus like how they're performing and what you need them to perform at. You can also add links, right? Like if you have training docs on like maybe Alessio is struggling on weekly calls, like here's ways and trainings to kind of get that call number up so you can definitely start to hit your targets. At a similar vein, this is actually, it was funny. I built out this report, was so chuffed about it, and then realized that you can actually get call outcomes in sales analytics, and it's fine because you can also build it in custom report builders. So I claim ownership of this report, but essentially, you can filter your activity report also using breakdown by call outcomes, right? So you can start to get a sense of like, wow, Alessio is not doing data very well because we have 39 calls that don't have a logged call outcome. But yeah, maybe there are some that he's hitting left voicemails. So that might talk about like how are you re-engaging those contacts, or there are some that he's connecting with, there are some there that are busy, right? And again, like if you're thinking about specific targets of like, we need to turn of those calls, we need to turn three on a daily basis into tangible conversations where you're connecting with leads. Again, this can help you start to contextualize that information. Goal attainment is another one that you can build on in sales analytics, just like using one of the sales and analytics reports, or you could look at the sum of deals that Alessio is creating as the deal owner over time. So again, it is our average deal report set to bar chart and tracked against a monthly goal. So again, it's very similar to what we built, but contextualized to like a specific rep filtered to Alessio. And again, you're just getting more and more contextual data about your sales reps. So again, we're going to say like deals created filtered to Alessio. Based on count of deals. This might show you how well the sales rep is performing in terms of generating new deals for your business. Deal push rate, I cheated a little bit. This is something that you get in sales analytics, but again, it's going to show you how often like Alessio is pushing deals versus really tuning into the deals and actually progressing them through the pipeline. Don't worry about those same numbers again. Oh, actually that does make sense. Again, demo data, am I right? You can start to look at things like average deal size. Again, this is just the same report here, set to rather than sum, which is totals, set to average. So you can get a sense of like your sales reps and how well they're creating bigger deals. Maybe that's something you could even just add a little nudge in. We'd like to see this trending upward month over month. And then maybe you're, again, because it's iterative and you have more questions, very curious about like deal velocity, how often or how long Alessio is like trying to, or how long Alessio takes to actually close a deal. And then you might finish off this sales reps dashboard and see how Alessio is doing in terms of data quality management. Like maybe if you're having your reps, put in contacts manually, you want to make sure that they're putting in the right information. So you could create a KPI report that shows which values are missing for Alessio. So, okay. I'm so sorry. We went so far over. Thank you all for sticking with me. Clearly, I get very excited about custom reports. So I will make a note to be less loquacious over time. So this is like the one, so you built three reports, right? We covered how to create 3 reports. Those 3 reports, for all they seemed really simple, are really powerful when it comes to, at least in this case of like a sales manager and setting goals and tracking progress, at helping your sales reps do their job really well. So I don't want to leave you thinking that custom reports have to be complicated in nature, because in essence, they don't. What you need to always do is make sure that you're always connecting the value of the report back to what you're trying to accomplish, really having a strong sense of why that report exists. And you'll find that in the custom report builder, you don't need a bunch of colors, although colors are great, right? They tell you things. You really just need a sense of like what this report is trying to accomplish. How do I visualize it as simply as possible so people can quickly get the takeaway, and then add it to a dashboard that overall contextualizes the business problem and where we're headed. So I'm done. We won't cover any other reports for right now, but I did create a worksheet where if you're like, hey, like I just really need to get the reps in terms of how often I'm in the builder and I want to make sure that I'm doing the reports correctly. I know that's something that like sometimes people are like, I built the report, not quite sure if I put it together correctly. I created 10 reports that you can practice with where I promise, this is how you set up the report. And I think we have a link. Casey, let me know if I need to put it in the chat, that will take you directly there. It's not the most pretty worksheet. It's going to just like show you the recipes to build these types of reports and then some initial analysis questions, because again, I think that's like a skill set that is good to like build up over time, and start to think about, okay, like how can I ask really good questions from my data. So definitely use that as a means to practice. And while you're looking at that, I will look at our chat.
Wow, that was awesome. Best research.